Hello, students. This is part one of the post-World War II America, which expands from 1947 to 1975. So you have an information interactive packet that you'll need to complete some assignments in regards to this. And if you look on this page right here, you see a lot of things that are associated with the time period after World War II. We had just won this great battle against the Axis powers, defeated Japan, Italy, and Germany. Japan surrendered because we dropped the atomic bombs on them, and we made the world safe for democracy and freedom from Hitler's yoke and freedom from Hirohito's and Tojo's yoke and Mussolini's yoke. But problems are going to persist after World War II. We talked about the fact that the Soviet Union and the United States were strong allies during World War II, and that's going to change after World War II. They're going to become enemies. They're going to become jealous of each other. And a lot of it's going to be over the use of nuclear arms and the space race and other aspects in regards to different types of economic philosophies, and I'll get into that later. So I'm going to run down and talk about some of the people on this page and some of the items. Right here is Harry S. Truman, and he was president after FDR. FDR died, and he ordered the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So he played a big role in the post-World War II period. He integrated the U.S. Armed Forces. That's what he did, and he established the Monroe Doctrine to stop the spread of communism. You have Dwight Eisenhower, who's a great general who became a U.S. president. You have John F. Kennedy, very important president. He died at a young age because of assassination. You have Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ. You have Richard Nixon. And you have some leaders from foreign countries. This is Joseph Stalin. You've seen him before. He's the leader of the Soviet Union. He died during the Korean War. And this is Nikita Khrushchev, who became the leader of the Soviet Union after Joseph Stalin. This right here, you'll see this hopefully on your DC field trip in April. This is the Vietnam Memorial, which was built in 1982 to commemorate the 58,000 servicemen and women who died during the Vietnam War against communist aggression by China and North Vietnam. We'll talk more about that later. This flag right here represents the two opposing sides that really butted heads towards each other after World War II. Of course, you know that's the United States, and that this right here represents the Soviet Union. You see some other pictures like Martin Luther King and the baby boomers and the interstate highway system. Here's some photographs of post-World War II Berlin. You have to analyze that. In post-World War II Britain. I think this is after the Battle of Britain, where they bombed Britain for 57 days. Here are the remains of Hiroshima. You see the Japanese shrine, remnants in the background, a lot of desolation there. So war is awful. 70 million people died during World War II, and it's like billions and billions of dollars of cost in war damages. I can't even imagine trying to count that many, count the money and dealing with all that damage. I wouldn't want to do that. So in this page in your packet, so you need to find that. It says post-World War II. It says, learning from the mistakes of the past, the United Nations accepted its role as a world superpower, helping to rebuild Europe and Japan, and taking the leading role in establishing the United Nations. And you got to do a brain pop assignment on the United Nations. And here are your notes on the left-hand side, and here are questions that go with that you'll need to answer. And I'm going to read through the notes real quickly. It says, much of Europe was in ruins following World War II. Soviet forces occupied most of Eastern and Central Europe and the eastern portion of Germany. The United States felt it was in its best interest to help rebuild Europe and prevent political and economic instability. So we didn't want to make the mistake after World War I and not help rebuild Europe after the war and put the blame on anybody And that's what led to the Great Depression. That's what led to World War II, the rise of Hitler and dictatorships and whatnot. The questions for the notes I just read, it says, what part of Europe did Soviet forces occupy? When you occupy an area, you're in charge of it, you control it. And when there's a war-torn area, usually another country or an outside power tries to put law and order and stability back in place. Question 2, explain why the U.S. explain what the United States felt was in its best interest. So go back and look here. Rebuilding efforts, it says the United States instituted the George C. Marshall's Plan to rebuild Europe, the Marshall Plan, which provided massive financial aid to rebuild European economies and to prevent the spread of communism. We'll learn more about communism later on and how that works, why Americans were against that. Question 3, what plan did the United States institute to rebuild Europe? 3, what did the U.S. provide and what did it want to prevent? Next, it says Germany was partitioned. Partition means divided. Germany was partitioned into East and West Germany, so divided into two main parts. West Germany became democratic, and what that means is that the people in that country get to pick their leaders. They vote. They have a lot of freedoms that they enjoy, like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and freedom to criticize the government and have a say-so in how their government runs and can pretty much express how they feel. They resumed a self-government, which is a democracy, after a few years of American, British, and French occupation. So what that means is that the western part of Germany was occupied by the Allied forces that were consisted of American, British, and French countries. East Germany remained under the domination of the Soviet Union and did not adopt a democratic institutions. So the Soviet Union said, we'll control the east side, and so we can get it stronger, but we're going to make them communist. And America's not going to like that, and the Soviet Union's not going to like the fact that we're democratic. So it's going to be some rumbling going on there. Number 5, it says, in what parts of Germany partitioned? In what two parts was Germany partitioned? It tells you over here, East and West Germany. 6, what part of Germany became democratic and resumed a self-government after American, British, and French occupation? 7, East Germany was under whose domination? So who controlled East Germany? And what type of government did it not adopt? Next facts, it says following its defeat, Japan was occupied by American forces. So we occupied Japan after World War II, after we dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Sort of like when you knock your enemy down or your opponent down during a sporting event, you help them back up. And that's what we did to Japan after World War II. We knocked them down, but we helped them get back up because we don't want to have any sore losers and any ill feelings towards each other. We don't want that. And that's why the Japanese gave us a cherry blossom trees as a gift. And we gave them gifts too. Give gifts to Japan as well. We're good friends today. It soon adopted a democratic form of government, resumed self-government, and became a strong ally of the United States. So it became friends with the United States and also has a democracy. They picked their leaders. 8, what country after it was defeated was occupied by American forces? Just told you it was Japan. 9, what type of government did Japan adopt, and to what country did it become a strong ally? That's an easy question. It's the United States. So make sure you write these answers down. The last part, it says establishment of the United Nations. The United Nations was formed near the end of World War II. So it was formed in like 1945 of only 26 countries to create a body of nations of the world to try to prevent future global wars. And it has been around for like 74 years. So it's prevented World War III so far. Knock on wood, we have had no World War III, but we still have had global conflicts after World War II. That's just the way mankind is. Question 10, explain the purpose of the United Nations and when was it formed? I just told you. Down here for number 11, it says, how did the United States' role change after World War II? And up here it says, accepted its role as a world power, and it wanted to rebuild Europe and Japan. 12, what did it accept, and what areas of the world did it help rebuild? It helped rebuild Europe and Japan. So make sure you answer those questions. All right, this is a map exercise I want you to do. I'm going to reflect this on the smartboard so it's in color so you can see it a lot better. It basically shows you Europe after World War II between the years of 1949 and 1989. Keep in mind that in this class we call Russia and these countries right here the Soviet Union. It says Soviet Union occupied and dominated countries in Eastern Europe after World War II. Answer on your paper, but answer it in your packet that you have. And this key right here says Europe. It says on its modern borders, and this represents the Eastern Bloc. The Eastern Bloc was a term given to the countries that the Soviet Union controlled. So the Soviet Union became more of an aggressor, more of a tough guy on the world stage after World War II. So they didn't like the United States as much. We became frenemies, you know. They didn't like our style of government. We didn't like their style of government. We didn't like how they do things. We didn't like how they did things. So we're going to be enemies. We're going to be rivals. So look at this map real good and answer these questions. It says, in what part of Europe did the Soviet Union have control? 2, during what years did the Soviet Union control the countries in dark red? 3, what type of government do you think the non-red countries had? So I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to give you some choices. It's democratic or communist. So it's the one where people pick their leaders and they have a lot of freedoms. 4, what part of Europe was not controlled by the Soviet Union? And number 5, name 5 countries that were not under the control of the Soviet Union. So you can abbreviate the names of the countries when you write them in your packet. And a good way to help you understand questions that ask for like directions and what part and whatnot is to draw compass rose with north, south, east, west on your packet to help you with that. So this is part 1, and be ready for part 2 later on.